jump into it. For the folks joining in the virtual lands, whether it's Facebook, which obviously, as someone who works at Facebook, I'm preference to, or YouTube. Thank you for joining again. This is another edition of Facebook Fridays. We try to get together every Friday with a partnership with the folks at LabCoatAgents to hear from industry leaders and how they're thinking about things, how they're managing the crazy world we're all living in, and how they're helping their agents and their businesses thrive. So today I'm really excited to have Courtney Chakarun, who is the CMO of eXp, join us. And she comes with a plethora of experience, actually very, very concentrated actually in real estate kind of tangential experiences. So she was the CMO over at Roostify, which is a large mortgage organization. And then you were at CoreLogic for a while before that.
That did 15 years at GE. I love my GE peeps as well. So predominantly consumer finance, and then we go into housing and digital and real estate.
Interesting. Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York, in Albany, and it back in the day when I was growing up was a big GE town. I think there's been some movement since then, but yeah, super excited to have you. And then folks that have dialed in for previous sessions, it's been a lot of CEO conversations. And so today I'm really excited to have a marketing expert in the room because, in my role at Facebook, our role is really to kind of help work with folks like Courtney and then with agents to be more successful on our platform. So your perspective is going to be super exciting. So you ready to dive in?
I am absolutely ready to dive in. I've got some great examples I was thinking about that were really kind of business and life changing that have happened on your platform. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Oh, nice. That's always great to hear. Yeah. And I thought it would actually be helpful to start with what is on most everybody's mind right now, which is kind of COVID and how are they dealing with that? And what's interesting about eXp is in a lot of ways, I feel like your business model was built for this moment, right? And so maybe we can start for the folks that are not super familiar with eXp, just to kind of give a little, the elevator pitch on who you guys are, kind of how your approach is maybe different than the traditional folks. And then we can dive into some of the COVID related questions.
Love to. So maybe I kind of start at the umbrella level, if you will. So I'm the CMO of eXPWorldHoldings, Inc. It is really a company that is, there you are, Keith.
Yeah. I didn't realize I didn't have the video on. So that's a total rookie move. And Courtney was being too polite to say, hey, this is weird. It's like talking to the voice of God. So I appreciate it.
I didn't want to bust you for not wanting to go on camera. So I just like, oh, good, whatever.
No. This yeah. If you're going to be on camera, I should be on camera as well. That's only fair.
So with eXPWorldHoldings, what we are really excited about is how our companies have come together, right? Our founder, Glenn, is an innovator, and he started a company over 10 years ago, and it was really focused on real estate. He was an agent and solving problems. But part of how we ended up acquiring other companies is through the focus on our agents and customers and making sure that they had the best business model, the best value proposition. So many years ago, at least 2016, at least last 6 years, we were introduced, and it was him at the time, obviously, to Virbela, which is a technology platform. It's a virtual work environment. Not sure if you've heard of it. You're always welcome to come join me. But it's really how we connect as a company. And it's been able to fuel our value proposition. So we have one of the best ones out there in the industry, because essentially we don't have a bricks and mortar type location, right? Very, very, very virtual in that regard. And we really look to make sure that we're getting the best and the brightest when we're coming into this environment together, which is where Workplace comes in for sure. We also have Success. Success is 124 years old. It's professional development, has a magazine, it's got a website. It's really exciting. It's something that also helps our agents in terms of training and development. So it all really fits together well.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And the virtual world aspect is super interesting. And what I tend to see as oftentimes what people think are crazy or on the fringes 5-10 years ago become mainstream. And then when you have moments like what we're all going through with the pandemic, it often is an accelerator of some of these trends. And so, would love just if you could talk a little bit about that environment that you guys have created and and what it means to you, but also kind of how that meaning has maybe changed or been enhanced as we've gone through this world where everybody's essentially virtual.
Yes, and I'll triangulate that with the value of workplace, because that is really one of our biggest tools in terms of collaboration. So, the environment that we're operating in, I mentioned that we have Verbella, which is a platform for virtual engagement. So unlike, say, what we're doing right now with Zoom, where we're seeing each other's faces, if you go into one of our campuses or one of our worlds, you're going to select an avatar and you're going to present yourself as an avatar. So when I'm having meetings, story is when I applied for the role and was talking to Glenn and other leaders all the way through to accepting my offer, I did it all as an avatar. Yeah. And I didn't actually put eyes on Glenn because, it's COVID, until about 4 months after the fact. And you'd think, wow, how do you really connect with another avatar? Does it feel different if you don't see somebody? And the reality is it doesn't. I'm as connected with this group of individuals. I've been here for a year. Next week is actually my anniversary. I'm as connected
Congrats.
as any team or company or leadership team I've ever worked with, period, full stop. So, any sort of thought I have around how this is going to work, I've only seen benefits. I mean, at this point, you can work anywhere, anytime, any place, you name it, right? And so what we've been able to do is, one, you see people that typically wouldn't, I'm just going to talk a little bit like the psychology behind this. People that typically might not speak in a meeting or an interview, a little bit more introverted, you see them talking up more, right? Because with an avatar, there's a real kind of an equalizing factor there. It's extraordinary, and this is going to be a theme that you'll I think it's going to thread through our conversation. It's very, very fast, right? So in terms of moving to meetings, moving to collaboration tools, going to workplace, setting up videos, it's all extraordinarily fast. So the productivity and the efficiency you get, it's hard to even explain it, right? Because I kept thinking, if I don't see people, is this going to be weird? And the answer is no. It's actually almost strange when I do see people now. So it's counterintuitive, but the long story short here is the value that I see that we're bringing is this platform that fuels a value prop with the best technology and allows everyone to have a voice.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. And so I guess the long story short is, if I went off video, you'd be fine with that because that's your normal day.
So I didn't say anything. I was like, video, no video, either way works for me.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things that you hit on that I think are super interesting. One, we've been thinking a lot about, and a lot of companies have been thinking about, kind of biased and unconscious bias, and so much of people's what they bring into, whether they're hiring someone or they're meeting someone or it's a client meeting, is that physical connection. And when you move it to a different environment, I'm not saying all bias goes away, but it changes that, right? So the fact that Glenn never actually saw you in person or met you in person and still hired you, there's a different evaluation process, which I think is super interesting. And then the point around kind of the extroverts versus introverts, the people that are going to talk up in meetings, the people that are not going to talk up meetings. When you shift that framework, it levels the playing fields in some ways, which is I had never thought about. That's super interesting.
I think workplace does something similar, right? Because we vacillate between, we're collaborating on workplace. We are obviously in our virtual worlds, but on workplace, you're not really normally looking at somebody, right? I mean, it is definitely a collaboration tool that we use. I use it more than email. I would say one of the major trends of being at this company in general, I use email a whole lot less. If somebody's going to email me, they either text or workplace me, hey, check your email. Right. Yep. It is my main source. It's how we communicate. And I also think that's another thing where you're kind of your face and your appearance is not full force in workplace. I mean, if you really wanted to click on someone's profile, you can, but that's not really what you're thinking about when you're having a conversation with somebody.
Yep. No, that's super interesting. And I would say, so let me ask you a question. Market research of one. I would agree with everything that you've said. And I think particularly in my line of work, where a lot of times we're on planes going to see clients and like we're reevaluating in a post-COVID world, what that's going to look like. Like how much do we actually need to be on planes? As our clients are evaluating a lot of the things that you guys have already thought about, which is like how much office space do we need, those types of things. I think the one area that tools like Zoom and other things haven't quite solved for yet is the strategy brainstorming session. So like you're sitting with all your directs and you're figuring out what are going to be your core priorities for the next 12 months for your marketing org, right? I'm curious how you're thinking about that piece of it, or if you're feeling that tension. That's the one thing I'm like, I wish we could be in a room and whiteboard this out.
We have the whiteboard type tools. We have, like I said, a lot of different voices that'll speak up now. So you're getting diversity in terms of like opinions and ideas. So I do think it's fueling more ideas. We do have the tools because we're leveraging, like I said, whether it be workplace or different types of, sticky notes. So in the world, it's interesting that you put it this way. We were working on some brand work, and we're in this virtual world as avatars, and we are putting sticky notes up and we're writing on sticky notes, just like you would do in the real world. The unique thing is, on Zoom, you kind of know who's around you, right? Well, I'm walking through eXp World and I bump into somebody, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? You have these spontaneous interactions. It becomes very psychological, because earlier today I was meeting with my team and we've scaled, significantly from a marketing perspective. And what used to be, like 10 seats, now we don't have enough seats for everybody. Now keep in mind, we're still avatars. These seats are essentially virtual. So I said, oh, we need a bigger room. But I really thought, oh, not everyone can sit down. We need a bigger room. So it does become something that's quite natural to you. And it's been, I think, super helpful from being able to whiteboard things, more so than I thought originally.
That's super interesting. And so obviously, you guys were set up. You guys had built the memory muscle around muscle memory. There it is, around kind of virtual interactions, virtual collaborations, virtual culture. I'm curious, in the last year and a half, when kind of we've all gone through this unusual period, what has been the thing that's been surprising? Whether it's been this thing that is like, wow, this was really great, we didn't think it was going to work that well, or maybe both stories of like, this is a challenge we didn't think we were going to have to deal with, and now we had to because of COVID.
One of the most remarkable things that I've seen is in the last year, we've launched in over 10, countries, markets, and we never got on a plane. Oh, wow. That wouldn't be possible a few years ago, right? But it was for us, because we had a business model that scales in different countries and resonates. And because of our world and how you can work from anywhere, immediately we were starting to get traction in other countries and building a global brand. So that's really, really unique. We also, as just, thinking about the real estate, the brokerage side, the EXP, we've been able to launch a commercial business. We've been able to grow to over 55,000 agents. So it's been significant from a growth perspective. You kind of think, am I going to be hamstrung in any way by what's happening? And that's just not the case for us. We have been just unleashed.
Yeah. And then any challenges that like, oh, I didn't really see that becoming a challenge in this period, and we had to kind of work through it?
One challenge, and it's more of a, what's the best way to optimize? We do a good job with events, right? And especially in real estate, which has been, traditionally a place where, let's just say we're meeting from a colleague perspective or networking. People would go to rather large events to meet up with other agents and thought leaders, right? And they were very much focused, just like a person buying a house, like kind of this person-to-person situation. And the more that we've started to define the events, we've been able to incorporate, and this isn't a sales pitch, it's just something like that surprised me. The last couple of events we've had have been 3 or 4 days, and they've been 100% virtual, right? We just are now starting to kind of figure out, is there a hybrid version? So the last one we said, okay, let's do 3 days virtual, and then maybe we have some of the smaller groups meet, in different cities, and we can join those. And you go, okay, how would I keep someone's attention for 3 days in a virtual world, or even in a regular world, right? I mean, that's kind of a hard, nut to crack. But what was unbelievably fun is, because of the streaming tools, we invited DJ Jazzy Jeff, right? So he was spinning for us one evening. All the avatars have commands where they can do all these different dance moves. And it was ridiculously fun. So, people that don't like dancing, well, they're out there busting a move. So being able to see his face, watch him spin, have the avatars running around, it's highly entertaining and fun. That was something I didn't expect. But the challenge there is, how do we get the best of both worlds? We do want to see each other, right? I mean, I don't think you want to go 100% one way or the other. So my challenge now is with our team, we will have our first in-person event in probably 18 months later on this year. and we expect to have 5,000 people there, is what's that transition like, right? Talk about having muscle memory. Not doing a big event in 18 months is something that we have to think through.
Yeah, and I think the hybrid is a really interesting thing. Like I often describe the last 18 months as being, we're all in this like combined social experiment, right? Like we're all kind of and there are going to be things that come out of this that will continue as trends or as behaviors, because it's just a fundamentally better way to do things, right? And there are going to be some things that are specific to this moment that we're going to want to adjust, right? And so I'm curious, and I think you alluded to this around kind of what is the hybrid model, and like events are a great one, right? Because you can get more people to show up at an event if it's virtual, just by the fact of like it's a lower bar to entry. No one has to get on a plane, no one has to book a hotel, all that stuff.
We're seeing 3x. We're seeing about 3 to 4x.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then it's also arguably, I would argue, and you're the expert here, so tell me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, it's probably harder to keep people engaged for those 3 days, because I mean, everyone's got their phone in their pocket at any time anyway, but there's all these screens you can get access to, your kids could come in or whatever. And so you're going to think about content, I would imagine, slightly differently, right? And so I'm thinking about, as I think about kind of real estate and an agent and the life of an agent, and as we come out of this and we go back to quote unquote normal, I'm curious, what are the things that you think are trends that are going to continue beyond COVID, and what are the things that you think are probably going to more likely go back to more kind of status quo?
So what's changed and what hasn't, right? Like what we think, or what may actually return back. So I think what's changed is that people can understand now that you can buy a home virtually, right? That you can, if you take a look at just the housing environment, and it's been like this for a few years, you have essentially an inventory issue, right? You've got lower rates, you've got home price, increases right there. So you've got this kind of perfect storm where if you want to buy property, you're hearing all these crazy stories about people trying to buy property, and they're going in and it's already been bought, and they have 15 minutes to do a virtual walkthrough, right? Some of that intensity is market driven, right? Especially in the US. And I think we're going to see that for a bit. But what isn't changed, right? Just because you're going and doing a virtual tour of a home, what hasn't changed is the role of the agent, is the fact that the agent is adding a significant amount of value. I've heard for the last 5 or 6 years, oh, everything's going to get automated. We're going to automate everything in the housing industry. It doesn't really work like that. If something is delivering value, that person's role may change because they have more technology at their fingertips, right? But people like working with agents. It's an important role that's never going to change. I really don't see it, but I do see the role evolving and getting more tools and techniques. I do think that people now have an appreciation for speed and responsiveness. So how difficult it is for you, like if someone's trying to get a hold of you, especially during COVID, like this work-life balance has completely blurred, right? I mean, how often have you I've had a hard time even with that transition, because I'm working from home or I'm working for somewhere else, and my family's walking through here, my dog's barking. I think we've become so much like accepting of the fact that people are going to incorporate or try to harmonize work and life, right? That's something that I think will change, and that people will be seeking what I consider to be lifestyle jobs that connect with them on a different level, like on a purpose level. It's purpose driven because they're understanding that line is blurred, and they want to do something where they can bring their authentic selves to work and to home. It's not a different person, in other words.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because that, first of all, that line geographically is blurred. I still remember like the drive home from work was my transition period, right? I'd like listen to music, listen to podcasts, whatever it is. That's my kind of unwind down, and then moving into being, a husband and a dad and all that. And now, like you'll probably hear in a few minutes, my kids are going to be home from school and they're going to be screaming, and they don't care that we're on a webinar, right? And so that, our culture, our work culture needs to evolve to meet that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I often take calls and people are literally in their bedrooms taking calls, right? And so, it's an interesting trend. how we navigate that, I think, is really helpful. And you touched on mission driven work, and right. And so Facebook is a mission driven company. A lot of the things we talk about are our goals, right? Which is to, connect the world, make it more open. And a lot of it is from a business perspective is how do we empower small businesses? And so some of the stuff that I'm the most proud of, particularly over COVID, is the work we've done on my team, specifically with agents. But if you think about Facebook as a whole, how do we help support them to keep them thriving and surviving in this really tough time, right? And so that gives me a lot of a sense of value. I'm curious how you think about kind of EXP as a mission-driven organization, because I 100% agree. And I think that trend's been there for a while, of like people not just want to work with people that they like and make a decent living, they also want to feel like they're doing something good for the world. And so, like, how do you guys think about it or talk about that?
I think one is, if you just think about, I'm going to talk, we have several businesses, but I'm going to talk about, obviously the real estate portion of this. If you think about buying a home, it is one of the most important decisions of your life. It's usually a lot of kind of like your net worth, right? If you look at this, you're usually doing it maybe once every 7 years. So it's very, very important. It's very, very monumental. It's a monument moment for you, right? Yeah. Our agents connect deeply with the people they're working with, whether they're buying or selling a home. They've had to change, in terms of, adapt to the different rules of COVID, and now some of those are lifting. But in terms of, if you talk to our agents, they're focused on service. And I mean service, not just from like a transactional, I gave you a service, meaning how do I bring my best self to this engagement? They're very focused on personal and professional development, and they're multidimensional. So we tend to have these conversations about, for instance, social media is a massive channel for real estate professionals. It's massive because people would like to see more than one dimension, right? I think you and I have just naturally started talking, and I've made some assumptions about you. Okay, you've got children, right? You probably likes weird art, right? So, you start to get to know somebody, and when you're in their home or you're going to help them buy their home, it's a different type of interaction, and it is mission driven, and it is focused on service. And that's how our agents view things. Our agents are, and I'm very lucky and grateful to have this, some of the best, if not the best marketers I ever worked with, because they're marketing their brand. And our company is really known for highlighting it and making the agent brand hero, right? So that's why they're doing the marketing on social media, is they're marketing themselves. So you have to be authentic, right? And that's what's important to customers as well. You want to make sure you're working with somebody that you really know on the biggest transaction you'll make.
So let's talk about service, because it's something we think about a lot, both in terms of real estate, but I think at Facebook just in general, right? And service, I think there's a couple ways. If you talk to a typical agent, they're going to tell you a couple stories of how they delivered one-on-one for a specific value to a client, right? And that is 100% valuable, and oftentimes the most valuable interaction, because it's custom to what that client needs, and it speaks to the value of the agent knowing that person and delivering that, but is very, very, very hard to scale. And like Facebook is all about scale. And so we think a lot about how do we scale amazing customized services through technology, right? And so I'm curious, as a tech forward brokerage, like how are you thinking about that? Because, and specifically to your point around like work-life balance is super blended, and like, there are going to be times when a client needs an answer and the agent's not available because they're living their life and whatever. So I'm just curious how you guys are thinking about that.
So I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way, because as you were talking about this, there's been a very relevant example of how we would scale, really actually in workplaces very much involved, and for service, right? But in this particular case, the service was to our agents, right? And then the agents to their customers. So it's really very interconnected when you look at it. I kind of think like a B to A, a business to agent, and then an agent to consumer type value chain. So about a week ago, I'll tell you the story. About a week ago, the entire executive team was together, and we were together about 2.5 hours north of Seattle, Bellingham, Washington. And we were, going through workplace as we do during a break, checking out the announcement. We noticed a thread that was populating about a group of agents, and it had grown to about 100 people, right? So it's not like one or two, it's gaining some, some mass agents that were, and I won't go into the whole backstory here, just kind of, make it long story short, that were no longer able to participate in a lead gen program. That those services were not available to them. So, the question was, hey, I don't have these services anymore. Do you not have them? Oh, I don't have them either. Why is that? There's a lot of concern because, obviously agents want customers and lead gen is a piece of that.
Yep.
That's on a Friday. And like I said, you got the executive team there and we're watching this and we're listening and we're thinking, and less than 24 hours go by and Glenn, our founder, goes, well, we should just build that service for them, like right now. And I'm like, well, yeah, we have like the right people in the room. So, we identify this problem. This comes back to service. We identify this problem of agents not having the service of lead gen. We recognize it is a problem that is actually large, and it's something, if we put together a solution, will scale because it's something people want. Next thing we know, we've actually got a concept by the end of, I'd say, Saturday evening. We launch on Sunday. So from problem at Friday to ideation, building website, testing, to launch on Sunday, we move extraordinarily quickly, and we were able to bring all of those agents that were impacted by losing the service of lead gen from another provider into a workplace channel. So they're telling us what they want, what they don't want. They're talking about how they want to be able to connect with their customers. They're co-creating a product. So that to me feels like a really strong example of service because, now we're, just, 5 days into this, and we've been able to develop a strong lead gen platform that we know our agents want because it was taken from them, right? It's success experts. And for us, we're really proud of it. But sometimes you're given these opportunities because something happens, and that scale and speed is something that workplace, if we didn't have those workplace assets, that kind of social listening, it might have taken us a beat to figure out this happened, right? It didn't happen to the majority of our agents. It probably happened to a couple hundred. And you've got over 35,000 agents, right? So being able to have workplace for social listening to figure out what's happening, to be able to move and create a service model for our agents so they can then serve those customers, that's the power of workplace for us. Notice we weren't on email, we weren't on text, we were in workplace, right? We were in the virtual world, and we were, in some cases, because it happened to happen during executive leadership meet, in person.
No, I love that story for a couple of reasons. One, in my mind, in a lot of ways, in what gets lost a lot of times when you think about moving fast is the foundation, right? Because you have a tech foundation, both from a communications perspective with workplace, but then also a tech foundation for additional services like the lead gen things. Like you can't move fast both to hear what your agents need, but then to respond with an actual product if you don't already have those existing existing platforms in place. And that's really exciting. And I love that. I'm curious, and you touched on it a little bit, so I think I know your answer, but I want to ask it anyway. Like in your role as a CMO, it's an interesting one because your role as the CMO is going to be different than some of the other clients I work with. That let's just say that the CMO of Zillow, for example, right? Like it's very clear who her customer is, which is consumers, right? I'm curious how you think about your customers, and you kind of alluded to this, like consumer to agent, like how do you think about, like in terms of service, who are you responsible to?
We're extraordinarily agent centric. We have what I would consider to be the richest value proposition that we could develop, and we continue to develop because that lead gen platform I was talking to you about, it was created for our agents, right? Because the challenge they had. I absolutely care about the customer, right? But our agents are able to tell us what the customer wants. So I kind of have the best of both worlds when I'm listening to our agents, when I'm working with them. There isn't, we're talking on an hourly basis. One thing I do love about Workplace, any of these 55,000 agents, and we have thousands of them on Workplace every single day, can type in my name and send me a message. The access you get is unlike anything else. I'm going to give you one more story because this one is really near and dear to my heart, and I think it'll probably exemplify what you just said. I have worked in B2C, I've worked in B2B2C, I've worked in, B2B. This is a little bit of a hybrid, but once again, agent centric. That is our real focus for us. And we were, after 10 years, looking to evolve the brand. And when I say brand identity, but more specifically, the logo, the visual assets.
Yep.
I was getting feedback from agents that they didn't feel like the logo looked modern. And so I went to Workplace, dropped in a survey. Next thing I know, I've got over 4,000 agents that have completed the survey. Now, keep in mind, who gets access to this information this quickly? Normally, you pay for this, right? I'm not used to like shell out some big bucks to get this sort of intel, right? On a group of people that I deeply care about what they want, what they think.
Yep.
So through this survey, and I'm going to speed this up a bit, but through this survey, we were able to articulate that there was a certain element of the visual brand, the logo, that people were having a problem with. And that if we simplified it, essentially, they would be able to do more business. That was their correlation. I could sell more houses. I could get more people on my team. Wow. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to quantify why I would even do this particular brand change. So in the spirit of how we work, we told people on Workplace that if they had some concepts that they wanted to share, right? We put a tool in the Workplace, they could share those concepts, those visuals with us. But long story short, it came down to two concepts that people really liked. And instead of just, telling people which one won, we put it into a Workplace poll and let thousands of agents determine. And it was to the point where agents were doing videos. It was like this logo group of people and this logo, and it happened to be kind of like during the election period. So they had a very heated debate over which one, but the engagement we got and the transparency, you could see who voted for which one. You know how these polls work, right? So our brand was built for agents. Our agents are the brand. And we were able to evolve that in Workplace and have complete transparency. And once again, co-create something fast.
Yeah, I love that because not only do you most likely get to a better outcome, because you're saying you're leveraging free market research for your customers, right? You've already defined agents are your customers. And so you can talk to them directly, but also you're getting buy-in, which is also a unique challenge that you have as a CMO, which is, your agents are contractors. They are not, W-9 employees of eXp, right? So for me, if Mark Zuckerberg pings me and says, "Hey, Keith, I need you to do this," guess what? I'm going to do it. You don't have that luxury, right? And so the ability to enroll them in this process, so it's not your logo that corporate's pushing down, but it's actually our logo that we've created, is brilliant.
It was something that was meaningful to all of us, that we wanted to be able to, like I said, create this with our agents. And I've never had access to those sorts of tools before to be able to do it. And to your point, we got buy-in the entire way because there's this process of creating it together and then voting. And so, the communication element of this didn't have to be as robust because people were in that journey for 90 days, right?
Yeah, I love that. So one of if I'm you and you were telling the story about these 55,000 agents that can ping you on Workplace, and on one hand, that is amazing. On the other hand, that is terrifying, right? If I'm you, just because you're one person and there's 55,000, right? There's only so much time in the day. And so how do you think about kind of the signal to the noise, right? So if I'm wearing my kind of product hat, like the story you told about the 100 agents that couldn't get access to this tool and then you built it. On one hand, that's a great story. On the other hand, the mathematician in me is thinking, well, that's not enough data to actually make that product call, right? So I'm just curious how you think about solving for the squeaky wheels versus solving for the general good. And maybe it's the same thing in your mind. I don't know, but I'm curious how you think about that.
There's a certain level of intuition that happens when you start to see something that you think is important or something that might be a problem in some way. So part of it is intuition and just understanding our agents and knowing the difference between a problem that's going to affect them financially and something that is I can't find my business cards, or I couldn't print them quickly and download them from the marketing side. They're both, important to that person at that moment, but one has kind of a greater implication.
Yeah.
Part of what's happening is we have a roadmap, right? Like everyone else, lots of priorities. We're constantly moving them around. But so in our minds, we already know what we're doing to grow, right? We're expanding to lots of different countries and markets. We are expanding from a business line perspective. We're expanding when it comes to what we offer our agents at large and the value prop. And then when we start to see people get a lot of energy around something that we were already had in our minds, a concept that we wanted to build, we just are able to accelerate the build of that. So it helps us with our roadmap. Is there noise that comes along with the process? Yes, absolutely. And I would never drown out noise, but how I might like get to the stuff I really need to get to is part intuition, but part having that roadmap that I can sync up quickly.
So it's about giving transparency and giving context. So like, this is what we care about. This is why we care about it. You can disagree, and maybe that changes what we care about, but at least starting from a place of this is why we're focused on this and not that. Yeah, that's super helpful.
See that we will shift certain priorities based on what our agents or their customers need, and we will, like I said, I've seen us turn on a dime. We did it last weekend, right? And we'll continue to do that. Workplaces help, like I said, because it kind of alerted us to this challenge. And the other thing that you'll notice is because people can like something, right? And they can comment on it. When a thread starts to get hundreds of comments,
yeah,
that's not noise, right? And then they'll tag, Glenn or one of our presidents or me. And it's like, oh, okay, they're saying, look at this. So there's some other signals that you'll see that are, that'll differentiate it from something that is not probably as broad in terms of a need.
No, that's super helpful. So your role is interesting. Again, it's not about what's the big TV or frankly Facebook campaign. It's marketing to agents, but it's also almost a CIO or CTO role, which is like trying to figure out market fit for the different technologies that you're building and getting feedback from the market, in this case, the agents to shape that roadmap. So I'm curious, as you think about, well, actually, let's start in the past. As you think about the last year, like what's been a tool? You just mentioned the lead gen program. Like what's another kind of tool that you're really excited about that you were able to ship for agents?
Oh, great question. Some of these, I'm trying to think about which ones are public that I can share. And
yeah, sorry. I don't want you getting fired. So if you like,
we have a lot of irons in the fire. I mean, there's one that I think is specific. That is, we do tend to, like I said, work towards making sure our agents have the best, whether it be benefits and healthcare or different types of services that are kind of unique to be able to provide that. That's one aspect of it. I think another aspect to it, and it may be less of a tool, but more of just kind of a reality, if that makes sense, is that, how often can you go into the headquarters of your office and go straight into marketing or straight into operations or straight into technology or straight into HR and ask them about this healthcare plan that we launched? That's not something you can do in the physical sense. But because we've built a headquarters with different floors, right, and a whole campus, that acts as a significant tool for us. So people will come over to my office, right? They will go over to HR. This sense of accessibility is one of our greatest strengths. And it's a little counterintuitive because you go, well, you don't have any offices and you don't see people. It's more accessible, just like the events are when they're virtual. So that is one of the greater tools that we have, is how we leverage the agent's ability to connect with us, but also in that virtual world, get what they need, right? We have self-service. I mean, we've built out what is a beautiful marketing center and brand store where people can come and download kits and all that. But what's better is when they can actually talk to the marketing leader in charge of that center. Either send them a message or say, hey, I'll meet you in the world. I've got a question about this. So that's a really nice kind of, I don't want to call it a 1-2 punch, but it really is.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you guys are a tech forward company. I loved everything you said about like office space. I feel like a real estate office is similar to a bank, where it's like, who goes to a bank? When's the last time you went to a bank, even before the pandemic, right? Like you go if you have to. I think consumers love meeting with agents, but they don't need to be in a fancy office to do that. They'll do it at Starbucks. They'll do it at their house, and so I love that. One of the things I'm curious about, just going back to scale for a minute, right? Like you've got 55,000 agents, right? So that is a ton of information that you're getting and scale you're getting. How do you think about leveraging that at the macro level to make agents smarter, faster, better, more effective?
One of them is we have the eXp University, and we have some of the best, we have industry leading market leading agents, right? We have, I mean, every week we have not just individual agents, but teams of agents joining, right? Week and a half ago, it was a significant individual, Daniel, based in Montecito, and his whole team. So the reason I mentioned that is that you get to connect with these leaders because they will go in and they will do these courses, right? So it's not like I'm just going into the university and getting regular types of courses. I'm getting courses that are taught by agents. The virtual events that we've had, that we've also scaled, we have simultaneous tracks going on. You mentioned earlier, how do you keep someone's attention?
Yeah.
You have a lot of content. So we have 3 or 4 tracks running. You want to know about commercial? Great, head over here. You want to know about personal development? Hey, head over here. Here's the university over here. Here's some more services. We've got something for everyone. And that university is a model that we've been able to scale because traditionally a lot of this training might not have been digital, right? So we've got a kind of best of breed program that has been built and developed by Curtis Dixon, who was just named Rising Star of HousingWire. So I mean, like, getting a lot of recognition as just being a leader in the housing industry at large, because I can't quantify it right now. Maybe take me a beat, but we have, as far as I know, almost more training than anyone else. And that's not necessarily what you would have thought. It's because our agents are involved in that process and developing the training. So from a training and compliance perspective, I mean, we're getting top marks.
Yeah. And you're not stuck in an office relying on who the top person in that office is or in a region. Yeah, that's super interesting. So you had mentioned, the agents within EXP, some of them are the best marketers you've ever worked with. And so I think, most of the people listening to us are agents. So I want to make sure that we leave them with some tips and tricks that kind of you're seeing. So I'd love to hear, like, it could be COVID related. It couldn't be, like, what is the things that you've really seen that have been like, wow, that's super interesting. I never thought to try that. And that's working well for their business.
Social media. I don't think I understood the power. I understood the power of digital marketing. I get that at large, but if you really want to deep dive into social media, I didn't understand the power of social media until I started working with real estate agents. Because, like I said, they're bringing themselves and their brand, and those are not 2 different accounts. That's the same person, right? And so that is, to me, they're not bifurcating. You get who you get. And I remember when I started, like, I don't know, like 500 people when all of a sudden, put me on Facebook, give me an invite. And I was like, whoa, I wasn't used to people I work with even being, think of the times, that might be a shift right there. How many people, you would know this one, but how many people have changed their thinking of not having coworkers or colleagues on their, whether it be Instagram or Facebook accounts? Because I think that rule is just totally blown up now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes into, it's tough for me to answer because obviously I've always been connected with people I work with at Facebook because it's Facebook. But I think it goes to a larger trend that we were talking about of this blurring of the lines, right? Like when you're taking meetings and you can see their bedroom behind you, it's like that barrier of, like, I need to keep, my home life private has kind of gone away.
It's gone away, and our agents have amazing social media practices. They have thousands of followers. They're live streaming. They're just extraordinarily engaged, and they're using it as a major tool to connect with their customers. I mean, how many hours do people spend on social media a day now? A lot, right? I mean, I know I do. I'm looking at it, and what's great is what you're seeing is now there is a line blurred, what I would say, between what would be kind of a corporate function and an agent, because I'm with agents, and when I see them in person, we're tagging each other in photos, we're sending each other videos. So you get this level of intimacy that you wouldn't naturally expect. And so that was my biggest surprise, is how heavily social media was leveraged for our agents, not just to connect with us, but to connect with their customers.
Yeah, and I 100%, and like the stat that really hasn't moved much is like the number one way in which an agent gets into business is through referrals, right? And so there's a lot of, digital marketing and digital leads, and that's all really important. But the most valuable, lead is a referral. And as people start to leverage their digital presence to reflect their real life presence, those worlds kind of start to blend, right? And that's we've seen a lot of impact of that. Is there anything else? It could be digital related, it could not be. I'm just curious, like, if there's anything you've seen that's just like, wow, that's super interesting.
Something, is fairly, you don't always want to, like, I'll call it like an oldie but goodie, right? Like there are certain things that just always work. Our agents do a lot of masterminds where whether it's virtual or in person, they get a group together to concentrate on a particular topic, right? And that's something where I'll give you an example. Brett Gove, I don't know if you're out there, I'll be talking to you tomorrow morning. Brett Gove is an amazing leader. He's got a lot of people on his team. People love him. A month ago, I think it was like May 27th, maybe. Let's see how good my memory is. Brett hosted a meeting out in Napa for luxury. And he got together what is a mastermind of people to talk about how do you work in a luxury environment? What happens when you have, a very expensive type property, a luxury property, which tends to be defined in different ways, but normally kind of like the top 10% of the market in terms of cost differs by market. That was a mastermind that Brett put together because he wanted to help better all the agents. And that, remember we talked about earlier, this kind of service mentality. Our agents are actively helping other agents. He invited everybody. There's times where he's had certain training materials, just give them to other people, right? So that is an example of our agents aren't competing. They're actually helping each other in a significant manner. And although I think competition is fierce between brokerages, within our company, those masterminds and the generosity and the service mentality our agents have, it's hard to compare that to any other industry.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the culture you've built, right? Like, if you can, I like to think of it as like this 1 + 1 = 3 culture, where if people work together and they see like actually all the rising tide lifts all boats, like that's actually a better outcome for all of us. Like these master classes, those typically are the most healthy and most productive cultures, right? Yeah. So this has been. I want to be cognizant of time. We have a few more minutes. Is there anything I like to ask everyone? You spend a lot of time thinking about marketing, right? You mentioned social media. We're a big player in that space. Obviously, that's important to agents. As you think about what you're hearing from your network, are there things that you would suggest we think about as Facebook?
Yes, there's one that is top of mind for me. So, you think about our company and how we have said Verbella, EXP, and in Success. These are, different websites, different brand names. These intra-company type workplace groups, we can put them together, right? I can put in different individuals, but it kind of is mapped over differently. I think the ease to which you can let people from different companies come into a place to meet is huge, right? Like for instance, I know I'm not supposed to use the word partner legally, but like I don't really consider people vendors. You'll never hear me use the word vendor, right? It's just somebody I'm engaged with. Our people that are working with us across the agencies, across our affiliate services. They may not have an EXP, particular like login, right? So that would be one thing. Even though I can do it, it's probably, and I'm sure you've done it as well. Let's just say I wanted to add you to a mastermind right now. It might take me a beat to figure that out, right? That would be something if we could do that with a bit more ease. Now, I don't know what that does from a business model perspective, but that's one where collaboration is key for us.
Yeah, no, that's a really good feedback. And especially as you're building out a platform, which you have, like you're going to have to plug in a lot of different partners. And how does that work? Anything else from like an agent to either a consumer perspective or an advertising perspective, or anything that comes to mind on that front?
You are all very creative, and that's something I really appreciate. And you anticipate and you get feedback and you care about your customers, right? Your users at large. The fact that you're anticipating what we want a lot of times, like a good portion of it, there are tools I didn't even think I needed, and all of a sudden I can't live without them, right? Like I said, now it's hard for me to even check email. I'm so dependent on workplace in a good way. I actually can't remember life before workplace is probably a better way of putting it. So I think just the enhancement of the tools that you have is valuable. Like I said, whether it's putting people into groups, you've got the streaming, you've got the ability to do the polls. I mean, I've almost touched on a lot of, if you think about what's been particularly meaningful for me is the social listening. Now, I don't know if you have analytics around social listening. I think you might have to go back and like do my homework a bit, but being able to pull up when I have this many people on Workplace, some more analytics around how people are conversing, there's thought bubbles, things of that nature. if you haven't, it's probably something I haven't been introduced to, but that's really helpful. The researcher in me, and you mentioned it earlier, like how do I know when something's a really big deal? Would always like to make a data-driven decision if possible.
Yeah, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to, but is a valid ask. Awesome. I have one last unrelated to real estate question, which is, as I've been talking, I've been admiring the art behind you. What is that? Can you give us a little background on what this is?
So I have a passion for artists, right? And in terms of like art at large, I tend to like more modern. I really like street art. And I think it's a quick story, but long story short, I always say that phrase. I was looking for some art because I bought the house in Arkansas, and I went to an area that kind of consolidates different artists, and I found something I really liked based on kind of street art. And as I'm looking at this, I look at the person's name. I'm like, in Arkansas. Like I wasn't trying to buy art from Arkansas. Turns out my mom is friends with his mom. His name is Eddie Love, the fifth. And so I was able to, like, it's just a very kind of strange coincidence. So he does a lot of street art. So being able to meet the artist and actually see all of his artwork, especially during COVID, and pick out something that resonated for me, which I think is kind of funny. You don't know who you're dealing with. Kind of felt like a fun thing to put in my office, right? You know, what version of me are you going to get today? Because it's always going to be intense, right?
Yeah, you can't see it. I have a collection of like candy skulls, so it kind of reminded me of that.
The same thing then.
Yeah, I'll ping you on the side because I might have to look this guy up. But yeah, really enjoyed the conversation. Would love to catch up in real life when you're back in the Bay Area. Yeah, thanks for the time. For the folks listening, thanks for checking us out. And yeah, we'll talk to you next Friday.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Courtney.